LIV is at some sort of crossroads now? Because a lot of those initial big contracts for Dustin and Brooks and Bryson are going to come up sometime next year in 2026. Don't think we're going to see those kind of astronomical numbers before. The news came out today. We were looking at the Sports Business Journal that they've hired 4 new employees under the new director of LIV Golf, Chris Heck. And it feels like we tried this one thing. It didn't work. What do we do now? Because let's be honest about it. It has never been about growing the game. It's about using money to sledgehammer their way to pound a seat at the table of power, which is at the highest level of professional golf, the PGA Tour. And they almost got there. Hey everybody, what's up? Trey, Wingo here. Welcome into another edition of Straight Facts, Homie, the podcast where we don't have arguments, we don't yell at you, we don't tell you what we're feeling, we tell you what the data tells us about the games that we love and why we expect the results and why the results happen the way they are. It's just that simple. A lot of things going on in golf recently. We had the conclusion of the PGA Tour season, the unbelievable Ryder Cup where the Europeans absolutely took it to us again. And then came the news that LIV Golf has burned anywhere between $1.1 and $1.5 billion through their first few years of existence. And what happens going forward? So with that in mind, we're bringing back one of our trusted voices who you've heard before on this podcast, a man who's been, quite frankly, an outspoken critic of LIV Golf for a variety of reasons that I deem very valid. So we wanted to get his thoughts on this. We're talking, of course, about Golf Channel and NBC golf analyst and former PGA Tour player, Brandel Chamblee. All right, Brandel, with all the news about things that are happening or not happening related to LIV, I thought, who could we talk to about this? And you obviously are the perfect guy. So when the news came out that, you know, depending on the numbers you read, LIV has lost anywhere between 1.1 and 1.4 billion during this escapade endeavor to try and create this thing. I think a lot of people focused on the lost money, and I'm like, that's really not the issue. They don't mind losing money. They mind losing attention. They mind losing interest. They mind losing leverage. And I think that's the much bigger story here, is that no one seems to care.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you try to build something out of crooked timber. You know, their ideas trying to found the game of golf, forget about where the money's coming from and just think about their ideas. It wasn't based upon merit, first of all. And those are the kind of things that compel people to sit down and watch TV. There's hundreds of live sports options for the world to watch every week, hundreds. So, you know, you only have so many hours in a day, and what are you going to watch? You're going to watch things that are based upon athleticism, based upon merit, and things that matter. I think everybody rightly looks at LIV as a money grab. And it's, you know, the Saudi government trying to diversify their economy by buying up all of the success of the West, pretending that they're surrogate to that success. And everybody sees through that. And then they see through the fact that this is not about merit. It does not matter. I mean, I'm in the golf world. I'm around people that know the game cold. If I were to ask somebody who won the first tournament of the year this year on LIV, or the last, or, you know, what was the most important tournament on LIV, they would go Buster Keaton on us. They would not know.
For those people that don't know, that's a silent movie reference, the before the talkies. In other words, we wouldn't be able to speak about it because no one would know.
No one would know. And I, you know, look, I've because, you know, when I'm doing prep, I need to have some familiarity with LIV. So it's not like I don't watch it. I've tried, and I've tried to make sense of it. And then I've looked at, you know, the following of it. So people want to say that the players they got moved the needle. There's zero evidence of that when they play in LIV events. Yeah. When they come over to the PGA Tour events and they play, and if they're competing against compelling figures on the PGA Tour, the needle moves. But it doesn't move on LIV events. You get to our best players in prime time on the East Coast, nobody's watching. And that's a recipe for losing money. And they're apparently, you know, they're not worried about losing money.
Well, that's the thing that is interesting to me, because no one's denying that they don't have good golfers. That's never been the issue. The product is terrible. It's not a product that you want to watch. So the question now becomes, because, again, They have more money than any of us to burn. That is never going to be the issue. The question becomes, how much of it are they willing to burn, knowing the thing they really want, which was to create a wedge and create a diversion away from the PGA Tour that would make the PGA Tour want to embrace LIV. That's not happening now. Like the losing money thing is sort of, they were fine with that in my belief, and I think in your belief as well, as long as it created something else, a tension, a dynamic, a conflict, something that the PGA Tour would have to acknowledge. And when they had their first wave of signees, when it was Bryson and Brooks and Dustin and Sergio and a lot of the older but really still pretty good European players like Poulter and Westwood, it created that. And then they got the second wave when they got Jon Rahm, who said before, I'm about legacy, I don't need more money. And it was like two body blows to the PGA Tour. And then the rest of everything happened. And since then, it has been the PGA Tour throwing the haymakers, and LIV is playing rope-a-dope, trying to figure out what the hell they want to do next.
Yeah, I mean, the ratings this year were vastly improved over last year. Last year, I don't think that they were calculating the ratings the correct way. They've sort of changed that, to capture people that are watching on various devices and not just linear TV. Right. And the ratings are through the roof. And even when they use those same ratings to sort of capture who's watching LIV, the ratings are through the floor. They're not through the ceiling. I think a lot of the players out there were misled, thinking that they were going to be the impetus to change. Amongst them, and at the top of that heap, was Jon Rahm. I think Jon Rahm was misled, probably by Phil Mickelson, maybe by Greg Norman, that he was going to be the impetus to change, that he was such a monumental star that if they got him, that's it, everything would collapse and they'd be forced to come together. Didn't happen. Look, there are very few people in the game of golf that cause people to stop mowing their lawn and rush inside to watch golf.
Correct.
Tiger, Rory, Spieth when Jordan Spieth was playing
Right.
like Jordan Spieth,
Right.
and Phil Mickelson eons ago. But when Phil went to LIV and talked about the atrocities of the people who fund LIV, and said that he could, in essence, use LIV as leverage to get what he wants from the PGA Tour, I think it turned a lot of people off. As a matter of fact, I think it turned everybody in the game of golf off, the core audience of golf. And they saw LIV for what it was, which was just a money grab. And it just hasn't galvanized people to watch it. You would have thought along the way that they would have made some substantive changes to, one, get world ranking points,
Right.
and two, try to mix it up and find out what really does resonate with the golf audience. Their idea was, let's play fast, so everybody gets on the golf course at the same time. Every single person that you talk to scratches their head at that one. You're telling me, let's just use the TPC Sawgrass as an example. Let's just say you're leading the golf tournament, but you're going to finish on the second hole. Mm-hmm. So 1 and 2 are 17 and 18, as opposed to 17 and 18. Okay, you're telling me that's as compelling a conclusion to an event? If we're going apples for apples here, it wouldn't be. The loud music, the leaderboards. There was
flash mobs.
There's no evidence that team golf. There was zero evidence that team golf. All LIV was trying to do, and they love to say that the PGA Tour is following their model. No. LIV was trying to capitalize on the popularity of the Ryder Cup, which, by the way, took about 70 years to become
a thing.
A compelling an event. And they're trying to capitalize on the atmosphere of the WM Phoenix Open. Yeah. Now, the difference is the WM Phoenix Open, I always say it's a party with a purpose, and that purpose is charity within the Phoenix area. $18.1 million was delivered to local charities this year because of the Phoenix Open. Philanthropy underpins the Phoenix Open. They're not partying and being degenerate out there. They are actually coming together and having a great time with the purpose of helping the community.
They're being a little degenerate. I could use a little less of what I see at the Phoenix Open, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, look, I mean, a lot of people could, but the bottom line is that that party generates tremendous amount of revenue that goes to charities.
Right.
As the Phoenix Open a couple of years gotten out of line, yeah, it has. There's been instances of that, but they right away tried to curb it. I think LIV is trying to create an environment like that is not based upon philanthropy. And it takes, I would say, some unique circumstances to bring that together. One, you have to have great weather. You have to have a sort of a stadium concept. And you have to have, I've always said that a business or an entity takes on the personality of leadership. And if you've ever met Thunderbirds, if you've ever been around Thunderbirds, and Thunderbirds is the civic group of people that run the Phoenix Open. First of all, what they are is tremendously successful, who give in the neighborhood of over 100 hours to charity over the course of the year. Just to be even eligible to be a Thunderbird, you have to have done that in the previous year. So that tells somebody that's very civically minded, very philanthropically minded, who has the time to give to charities. And you put those guys together who are innovative and creative and entrepreneurial spirit, and what comes along? The Phoenix Open. It's really hard to duplicate that. It's very hard to scale that. But LIV's tried. They've tried throwing a lot of money at it. They tried getting all the players. There are a lot of things that are wrong about LIV. The PGA Tour has sort of a pipeline to building stars. LIV doesn't have that. They can only poach stars. They can't develop them. Right. They also have, the PGA Tour has all of these different narratives that collide over the course of a week. You'll have underdog stories. You'll have sort of good guy. You'll have sort of bad guy stories. You'll have long hitters. You'll have short hitters. And everybody just gets completely immersed in those. And the narrative on LIV is, at least as far as I can tell, is let's have a big party. Let's play some music. Let's pretend that we're all great, that we're all having a blast here. And it hasn't resonated. It just absolutely has not resonated with people.
It's interesting.
And I think that's because I don't think they understand the game of golf.
You mentioned Phil. I played with Phil at the Century Pro-Am in January of 2022, literally days before his.
Do you know why he was there? Do you know why he was there? He was there recruiting players to go to LIV.
Oh,
he was there.
He hadn't played in a long time. Yeah, he hadn't played in the Pro-Am
actively recruiting players to go to LIV. I talked to Mark Rolfing, who Mark Rolfing, of course, is Mr. Hawaii and Mr. Kailua.
Yeah.
And he went out to say hi to Phil, and Phil openly told him that he was there recruiting players to go to LIV. So there are a lot of reasons why Phil is persona non grata. One was he was openly on PGA Tour property recruiting players to go to LIV. Two was the aforementioned faux pas that I talked about as him using the atrocities. And three, he was involved in a lawsuit directed against the PGA Tour.
Well, the reason I brought that up is literally I was playing with him, I think, less than a week before those quotes came out. And we actually had a really good time on the course. He gave me his number and all this kind of stuff. And then suddenly the quotes came out. That text went green real fast. And, he went under hiding for a while. So I guess I think, I'm not sure, I think LIV is at some sort of crossroads now because, a lot of those initial big contracts for Dustin and Brooks and Bryson are going to come up sometime next year in 2026. I don't think we're going to see those kind of astronomical numbers before. And, the news came out today. We were looking at the Sports Business Journal that they've hired 4 new employees under the new director of LIV Golf, Chris Heck. And it feels like, okay, we tried this one thing. It didn't work. What do we do now? Because let's be honest about it. It has never been about growing the game. It has never been about the charitable things that you talked about. It's about using money to sledgehammer their way to pound a seat at the table of power, which is at the highest level of professional golf, the PGA Tour. And they almost got there. They almost got there with the deal that was brokered, between the PGA Tour and LIV. And then obviously there were many, many hurdles that had to be sort of gone over for that to happen. And then suddenly the PGA Tour has had a couple of really good years, and the leverage that LIV had, they don't have anymore. It's now on the PGA Tour side. So what's the new strategy here? Because there's a line in politics called useful idiots. And I want to be clear. I'm not calling the players that took the money useful idiots. You got a lot of money. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But those players were used for a purpose that maybe they didn't even understand, which was to make sure they were the thing that could broker a deal where LIV really wanted to be all along involved in the PGA Tour.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't believe that this proposed alliance between LIV and the PGA Tour was ever serious. I think all that was to end the litigation and to end the discovery. I talked to somebody who was in that room.
That's fair.
At that table. So there weren't very many people in that room, but I did talk to somebody who was absolutely in that room shortly after that deal, that proposed deal. And he told me there will never be a deal between the PGA Tour and LIV. And then he said, sort of matter-of-factly, they're bad guys. They're bad guys. And I was like, oh, yeah, maybe you don't want to be in business with them. I've made this analogy before, but I'll make it again, just real quickly. Let's just imagine the people who founded LIV, the people who fund LIV. Let's just imagine, and because people want to say they took the money, you would take the money. It's like, okay, maybe, but let's just try to put this in perspective, because they're easy to obfuscate who they are. If you just looked at the people who are funding LIV, let's just say it was an individual, and they lived right down the street from you. It was just an individual. And this individual beat his wife. He killed people who disagreed with him, had no tolerance for anybody who spoke ill of him. Matter of fact, would kill them, and had no tolerance for gay people. But had a lot of money and was willing to buy entertainers, to buy sports, to buy athletes, and I'm saying that they've turned a blind eye to that, and that is not lost on, as much as we want to say it is a bad product, and it is a bad product. I think the reason, one of the underlying reasons that not too many people talk about, is they do know where the money's coming from. And they cannot be fooled that easily. They can do the math. They can look and go, oh, 15 of the 19 hijackers for 9/11, they were from Saudi Arabia. Okay, Saudi Arabia is funding LIV. They can do the math. They're like, we don't like where the money's coming from. None of my friends, and I don't push my set down at the table, and they get far more colorful and vigorous in their condemnation of LIV and about the source of the money. So there's that. And then the product stinks. And they were not successful in getting players that resonate. They weren't. I mean, Phil self-immolated. Yeah. So it didn't work with Phil. It didn't work with Rahm. It didn't work with Brooks Koepka. It didn't work with Dustin Johnson. I don't know. It didn't work with, pick your 10 other sort of B-list players, the Ian Poulters and the Sergio Garcias. It didn't work with them. They bought plenty of stars and it didn't work. To me, that just says, one, people know where the money's coming from, and two, they're not interested in events that don't matter. Now, how can they change that? I don't see how they could change that. They're not going to suddenly create events that resonate with people or that matter.
Right.
Tiger Woods is not going to go to LIV. Rory McIlroy is not going to go to LIV. Scotty Scheffler's not going to go to LIV. Jordan Spieth's not going to go to LIV. There's a few others that could go, but maybe they're going to go take the money, but they won't resonate.
Yeah, for me, and I always get, I get a lot of LIV bots, or if they offered you that money, you'd take it. And I always say, well, they asked me to do it, and we had discussions, and I decided not to. Now, I'm not saying that I want to be clear. That was my choice. That was the choice I made. I don't regret it, and I was thankfully in a position where I didn't have to take it. You know what I mean? There might have been some other time in my career where it might have been something that I would have considered, but since I didn't have to, I really didn't want to deal with the shit. You know what I mean?
But did any of those players have to take that money that took it?
No. Well, there's a guy like Harold Varner, who I know Harold very well, and he's like, look, I don't think I'll ever make this money in my life, so there's a sliding scale for me on that, Brandel.
Okay. All right.
Like John Rahm, no. Those Dustin Johnson, no. Like what did Dustin say? I'm not joining LIV to play more golf. I'm joining to play less. You know what I mean? I think Will Zalatoris had a great line for most people. For most people, he said, "It's not life-changing money. It's just more money," and I think that's the best way to look at it. Although I will say there are certain people, like that probably, like Richard Bland, right? Okay, he's in his 50s. He won one time on the European DP Tour. He's like, what the hell, So
I don't know. He wasn't. I don't think he was on welfare. By the way, they
I know he was.
Will Zalatoris $140 million.
Yeah, and by the way, one of my favorite things ever about this was when Ian Poulter was trying to talk about why he would do it, during Full Swing, and he said, I really need to take care of my family, and then the next scene was him flying either to or from the U.S. Open on a private jet with his family that was so big his son could putt down the aisle in a putting contest.
Yeah,
I always thought the complete lack of self-awareness to have that in the situation. Yeah. As you're talking about that was a great sense of unintentional comedy for me.
Yeah, actually, that was from Austin to the UK. Now, you look up what that private jet fuel would cost to go from Austin to the UK after the match play. That
one always resonated with you, like, really not selling it the way I think you are, buddy.
And he had such a great runway ahead of him in the world of golf, in terms of being a Ryder Cup captain, of being, Champions Tour player, commentator, corporate outings, as many as he would want, as did Phil Mickelson. And they traded all that for what they thought would change the trajectory of professional golf. Didn't work.
Right. So here's the deal. I mean, here's several questions that I have. Right? Do you think there's a path back for some of these guys? Because we talked about this in a little short I did on this. Brooks Koepka, one of the reasons he went is he wasn't sure if he was ever going to be healthy again. It was sort of like his pension. You know what I mean? He never knew if that knee was going to be good again. It's my belief. I don't know. I haven't talked to him, but I believe he would love to come back. I think Rahm would absolutely love to come back. Dustin, I don't know. Who knows what Dustin Johnson thinks? Yeah. Which actually, that would be a great podcast. What is Dustin Johnson thinking? That would be that might be the greatest golf podcast of all time. What is Dustin Johnson?
It'd be a really short podcast.
Well, I mean, they'd be 3-minute segments. All right, we'll be honest about it, but they'd be an entertaining 3 minutes, I think.
I mean, I like Dustin. I do.
I do
but
too.
I think one of his gifts is that he just doesn't complicate things.
Well, that's the greatest TaylorMade commercial of all time. When I'm hitting up to hit a fade, I want to make sure the ball moves left or right, and that's how I hit a fade. Got it.
I'll take that.
Is there a path, you think, eventually for these guys to find their way back to where they probably really want to be?
Yeah, I mean, there'd have to be some penalty for them to come back. I mean, if you look at that board and who's on the board of the PGA Tour, I would say, there is a path. There would have to be some penalty, some time in the penalty box after they leave LIV. And, everybody's going to say, oh, no, we want Brooks back straight away. It's like, well, I mean, the Tour's doing just fine without Brooks Koepka. Right. Tour's doing just fine without Phil Mickelson. Doing fine without Dustin Johnson. Doing fine without John Rahm. There has to be some penalty because let's not forget the Tour had to spend a lot of money to fight that litigation and to end the litigation, eventually ending the litigation. But a lot of their rainy day fund would have gone to waste. And people will say, well, the PGA Tour is better now in terms of money. And it's like, well, let's wait and see. If the result of this is that private equities come in, SSG, they've infused the Tour with all these billions. Well, little as I know about private equity, they want a 10x return on their money. Yeah. And if they want a return on their money, that means, who knows? Could the Korn Ferry Tour, could the Champions Tour be on the chopping block? Could the Tour go from 45 tournaments to 22 tournaments?
I think that's very likely, by the way.
Yeah, which, personally I disagree with. I'd love to hear the other side of that argument. I think, the scarcity argument does not resonate with the golf audience. I get why it does in football. I get why it does in other sports. but I'm not buying it for golf. I think one of the reasons why golf is popular is because of the participation of those who watch it, the core audience, and they have a passion for the game of golf, and the continuity of the game of golf, I think, is important to core golfers as they walk into their restaurants, as they walk into their clubs, and it's a nice backdrop. And I think that they run the danger of being out of sight, out of mind, in the same way that tennis is not as popular as it used to be because people couldn't find it anymore. When it becomes difficult to find golf, will you lose your core audience? And by the way, if golf is Ginny, all the way, Ginny, it's all the way up, why would you mess with the model? Don't you typically have to make changes when things, or need to make changes when things are struggling? The same way they did in baseball a couple of years ago when they gave us a pitch clock, et cetera, et cetera. Golf is, by all accounts, awesome. I don't understand the changes. But let's just say because of LIV, they decide to reduce the schedule, maximize profit in these events, take from the charity. In other words, I mentioned that WM Phoenix Open had 18.1 million. What if SSG, what if the for-profit arm of the PGA Tour says, well, I think we want 15 million of that. I think we want 17 million of that money. So now then, all the charities in the WM Phoenix area who've hired people to help disadvantaged, battered mothers, dislocated or mislocated families, et cetera, they got to fire people. They can't take as good a care of people. And all of a sudden now you've got a harder time establishing a volunteer force because the volunteers can take off their jobs under the pretense that they're working for charity and get paid. Well, if they can't do that anymore because they're not working primarily for charity, they'll not be able to have a week off paid to go work for these tournaments. And these tournaments rely on hundreds, if not 1,000 or so people for volunteers. So the whole model of the PGA Tour will be turned inside out to maximize profit. Instead of being a non-profit event, it will be a for-profit. And in the process, losing the opportunities that provide the pipeline to develop stars on the PGA Tour. Golf is not like other sports. It's not at all. If you look at the number one quarterback in the NFL and the worst quarterback in the NFL, the number one quarterback in the NFL and the average quarterback in the NFL, there's about a 20-30% difference in their success rate. Same in scores, same in baseball, same in pitching, same in hitting. In golf, if you look at the lowest scoring average in golf, the average scoring average on the PGA Tour, and the worst scoring average on the PGA Tour, you're talking about a 2 to 3% difference from the best to the average, and about a 5 to 7% difference to the best to the worst.
We actually did a study one year when I was at ESPN. We did a deep dive into the stats, and the difference between making millions of dollars and losing your card was essentially one putt or one stroke per round for every tournament that you played in the entire year.
That's right.
That was the difference between I'm making 7 large to damn it, I got to go to Q school, or I got sponsors exemptions. So what you're saying is the margin is razor thin. I will say, I don't think it's a coincidence that these elevated events and the tour prizes went up massively because of LIV, right? I don't think that's a coincidence. So whether
it did.
It absolutely did, and I think that it is kind of comical on some levels that the PGA is like, oh wow, what is this money doing here? I don't know why we haven't been spending it all this time. I mean, it was a little like, oh, look at this. We did have a money tree, so we can make these things worth $19 million.
Well, initially they had about $300 million rainy day fund. Now they depleted that fighting lawsuits and supplementing purses. And for the most part, look, I mean, media rights funds roughly about 25% on average of the purses. And it's higher for elevated events, which means that the ratings are not enough to sustain these elevated purses. So they need private equity to supplement these purses. So now you tell me, if you have, we always hear people talk about sustainability. If you're running events that are not sustained by the ratings, where is the money going to come from in perpetuity to fund those events. There's going to be a come to Jesus moment at some point. And maybe here comes private equity. Maybe they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and they're going to condense the schedule so that the stars get to play. Well, the stars in golf, they do not drop anchor there.
No,
is Jordan Spieth as big a star as he used to be? Not at all.
No.
Is Dustin Johnson? Is Brooks Koepka? Not at all. If a star arrives on the scene and lasts 3, 4, 5 years, that's extraordinary.
Yeah.
They ebb and flow, and you have to have a pipeline to develop stars, and that's what these lesser events do. It wasn't that long. Jordan Spieth finished second in Puerto Rico in 2013. That was enough money to catapult him onto the tour in 2014. That pipeline goes away. Maybe Jordan Spieth is delayed getting on tour. Who knows? You do not know.
Tony Finau the same way. He rode that 2016 Puerto Rican Open till he finally won that second event, which for him was a playoff event, and that really solidified his place. And then went on to win 4 or 5 more times. The thing about rights fees, Brandel, is really interesting because there's only so much of that eventually in all sports. And I just, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, I think that we're going to come a day very soon, sooner than most people think, that everything is going to be streaming on a tech company because that's where all the money is. Like, there's only so much that ESPN, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. There's only so much you can squeeze out of that tournament, right?
Are you talking about maybe on a pay-per-view?
I just think the money, Roger Goodell, one of the smartest things he ever did was started streaming these things. And they asked him about it. He said, we fish where the fish are. And, the fish are Apple, Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, YouTube. That's where the money is. And, I think eventually we may be heading toward a situation, not only for golf, but for all sports, that if you don't stream, you don't see.
Yeah, I think the PGA Tour will experiment with, simulcasting events. These people are incredibly smart at the helm. I mean, with Brian Roloff going over to the PGA Tour, again, I'm worried about what will happen to the PGA Tour, but I have no doubt that they've got some incredibly smart people that will look at every single avenue to fish where the fish are. Yeah. I think they'll try to maximize profit, but that worries me that they'll do it in the process. They will, to some degree, sacrifice the pipeline that develops stars and the philanthropy that has underpinned the PGA Tour. And so I don't know that it's an absolute, you can make the absolute bull case that LIV is going to be, in the long run, good for the PGA Tour. I think you could easily make a bear case that LIV is not going to be great for the PGA Tour in the long run if it destroys the pipeline that builds stars, and also shortened events, and this idea that we need more shortened events with elite fields, it's just flat out wrong. They don't have the buzz on the property. These 60, 80 man fields with no cut, they just don't have a buzz on the property. You get there in the morning, there's 2 or 3 guys on the range. There's not 10 or 15 guys on the range. Yeah. And you're guaranteeing, when you do that, you are guaranteeing to your audience that they are not seeing the best golf. You're absolutely guaranteeing that they're not seeing the best golf, because the best golf will come about with as large a field as possible, because the difference between the best and the rest is only about 2 or 3%. So if you've got 120 players versus 50 players, you've got 70 guys, and of those 70 guys, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them are going to have the best week of their lives. In other words, you're going to see the best golf, the largest fields you have. And the idea of shrinking fields and accommodating stars is literally letting the inmates run the asylum. You can't do that. And I feel like there's a push to get that done, and I feel like it's misguided in a tremendous way.
So I guess like the philosophical question for me is, we're beginning year 4 of LIV in existence. In 2026 will be year 4. What will we be saying 4 years from now about LIV Golf? Will it be here? Will it? Will it?
No, I think it'll probably hang around. I do.
It's a lot of money. If they don't get, like, they don't mind burning the cash as long as they get the attention, and the attention just isn't following the burning of the cash.
Yeah, look, I think they'll hang in there. I think they'll eventually try to push to buy the DP World Tour. Or they'll, I think they will. I think they will stay and stick around. I think it's very important for them to diversify their economy, and they want to do that through a lot of different things, sports for sure. But golf is a perfect vehicle to get tourism, and they've seen the success with other Middle Eastern countries using golf. They've seen the success with China using golf to get people to come to hotels, to come to restaurants, et cetera, et cetera. And they're creating sort of a almost quarantined economic area where those fundamental religious ideas that forbid pretty much everything that goes with tourism, they're going to allow. So they're going to sort of turn a blind eye to it. And I think golf is important to them. So I don't think they're going to go away. I mean, I may or may not have told you about, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I played with President Trump. And the whole day we talked about LIV. And one of the things he said to me, which he said, look, I know you and he was pointing at me, he goes, I know we disagree on LIV. He goes, but let me tell you why LIV is going to stick around. He said, first of all, Yasser, the gentleman who runs the LIV PIF, he said, first of all, he loves golf more than you and I do. And I didn't interrupt him, but I was like, I don't know about that. You play golf every day. I think about golf every day, but okay, I'll let him go. Yeah. He goes, he loves golf more than you and I do. And he said, second of all, he said they have $32 trillion worth of money in oil underneath that sand. $32 trillion. That was the number he threw out. I don't know where he got the number, but I would imagine his resources are a little better than mine. Well, and so $32 trillion. He said, and he goes, and they absolutely need to diversify their economy for
that is without question.
That's without question.
They know that.
For very, very specific geostrategic and also long-term political reasons. So he goes, they're not going to abandon LIV. They're going to stick around. They're going to figure it out. Maybe they improvise. Maybe they make changes. Maybe they make the changes they need to be competitive with the PGA Tour, which would be having a Q school, trying to develop their own stars, which would be funding women's golf all over, which would be trying to create some organic way of developing golf within Saudi Arabia, which would be having a huge philanthropic arm, which would be changing the policies in their country that are still medieval, so the West wouldn't have to be aghast that they are funding the game of golf. I mean, there's a lot of things they would have to do on the way for us to sort of go, okay, we're somewhat amenable to medieval policies in their country funding this game, but that's a long way to go, and they don't seem amenable to doing any of those things.
Well, if they want to, I'd suggest two countries, Sweden and South Korea. They want to learn how to develop golfers. Sweden is a powerhouse, man, from a tiny Nordic country where it's freaking snow covered 8 months out of the year. They crank them out.
You know what they have in Sweden?
Yeah.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't have that. And
South Korea, the same thing.
And Saudi Arabia, they don't have that. And they also have incredibly cheap golf in Sweden, and they do everything they can to empower as many people as they can in Sweden. I mean, Sweden disproportionately produces great players. So does South Korea for a little bit different reasons. And Australia disproportionately produces great golfers. But you're talking about countries with the freedom of the West, and when you're talking about those freedoms, you couldn't get farther away. There is a country there is a company that rates countries on a democratic index, and they rate 172 countries, and Saudi Arabia is 172nd. 172nd in the world. I mean, it's behind Syria, it's behind China. It's behind some absolutely appalling regimes. So, there's no organic way I see for them to develop golf in their country. Tell me who won the Saudi Arabia Amateur last year. I must have missed that one. Don't know about that one.
Definitely missed the women's amateur for sure.
Yeah, didn't see that one. So, But again, President Trump was adamant that that LIV is here to stay, and if that's the case, I mean, they'll lose another $1 billion, another billion here or there, but they'll make another push. They'll try to poach some more players. You know, I know a few players that they're trying to poach, and but they're not big stars. There's somebody with just like a hint, of being a star. They're coming along, and yeah, they'll throw 20, 30 million at them, or 10 million at them, and they'll get them to bite. And what will happen to that player is that they will become anonymous, and they won't be playing against the best competition, and so their game will begin to deteriorate.
Yeah.
It won't develop.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes recently when Phil was talking about, I feel so much more relaxed at a LIV Golf than I do at a PGA Tour event. Yeah, because it's not real competition. Like, I feel much more relaxed when I'm playing with my buddies than I am in the member guest at Scioto, like I was last week. It's a different level. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, well, Roger Mobby has a great line that golf is only hard when you care.
Yeah.
And I guess we could have a sort of a different take on that.
Well, then I fucking care all the time because it's hard.
Right. I could say that golf really only matters when people care. Yeah. And by Phil saying he's relaxed out there, I think just underpins the fact that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to him. It doesn't matter to, I mean, if we can read between the lines, and by the decaying games of everybody out there, with the exception of Bryson, you can say clearly it doesn't matter to them.
But by the way, I do, you do have to sort of give a shout out to Bryson here. Like, to your point, like, Rahm has not been able to sustain himself through 4 rounds at a major when he was, as our good friend Justin Ray called him, the destroyer of worlds, when he was world number 1 after winning that Masters, his second major. Like, no one was better at finding a way to figure it out at that time than Jon Rahm. And all those guys, since outside of Bryson, have not figured out a formula to be competitive. So you do have to tip your cap on some level to Bryson, because he's managed to find a way to make it work where no one else has found a way to make it work.
Yeah, but I mean, it's not like he suddenly got better when he went to LIV. He got better when he...
No, he just found a way to stay.
When he
and
changed,
that, like you said, you talked about the decaying games. Everyone else's game has gone that way. He's found a way to keep it, and that itself, I think, is a victory.
Look, I think Bryson is a compelling watch, but the idea that he's must-watch TV is poorly founded. Yeah. I mean, the ratings are, nobody runs to watch TV when he's leading the LIV event. Yeah. Nobody cares to watch him then. They don't. But when he's going head-to-head against Rory,
right,
or head-to-head against Scotty Scheffler, yeah, they tune in.
Yeah.
Are they tuning in for Bryson, or are they tuning in for Rory? Or are they tuning in for Bryson, or are they tuning in for Scotty Scheffler? They watch to the tune of 3.5, 4, 5, 6 million people, if it's Masters or more, when Rory and Scotty are playing. It's 50,000 to maybe 450, 500,000 when Bryson and Rahm and Brooks and DJ are going head to head. It's, if it were a fight, they'd stop it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Look, it's just interesting because, I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm just really curious how long they're going to try and figure this thing out, because to me it's pretty clear. Again, no one's denying that they have good golfers. The product is just not something people find sustainable or interesting, and we'll see what happens going forward. Yeah. And I figured you were the perfect guy to talk to.
It's hurting all of them, but Bryson. I mean, it's clearly hurting all of them. It was good to see Jon Rahm back playing some pretty good golf this year, but even if you look at what he did this year, it's nowhere in comparison to pre-LIV departure for Jon Rahm.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So we'll see how it plays out. Listen, I always appreciate the time, brother, and I will find another reason to rope you in to talking to me about golf again, because apparently my audience is starved for it.
Good to see you, Trey. Well, they know you love the game, and you do.
I was about to say, I couldn't quit the game if I've tried, and I've tried.
Exactly. And I've tried too, by the way.
I've tried. It is not happening.
All right, man. Good talking to you, Trey. Congrats on your success with this show, buddy.
So once again, thanks to Brandel Chamblee for his time, and thank you for watching Straight Facts Homie. If you like what you see, and we hope you do, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button wherever you get your podcasts, especially hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We've got a lot of great things planned for you on this channel, and we can't wait to share them with you. So make sure you tell your friends, tell your coworkers, like and subscribe. Straight Facts Homie, it's what we do. We'll see you next time.